What if you could be seen, heard, and understood when it comes to your legacy? Good morning. Welcome to the Designing Your Legacy podcast. My name is Angelina Carleton. I have the pleasure to introduce you to Jason Skeesick. He is a U.S. Army veteran. He's also been the owner of a CrossFit gym in Chicago for 12 years. But since 2018, he decided to retire. So, welcome, Jason, to the show today.
Angelina, thank you so much for having me on the show. If the conversation before we hit record was any indicator, we are going to have a terrific time today.
Yeah, absolutely. We were laughing and talking about some deep stuff. And so
Yeah.
we're just going to dive right in. So I know that you are a coach today. You help many different types of entrepreneurs, but I want to start and go back in time for a moment. So you've served in the US Army. You started FitBiz University, which helped gym owners. And I think you're going to talk about that probably in a minute. And now you get to spend time with your new daughter, Lucy,
Yep.
in a perfectly engineered life, a perfectly designed life. So since this is a legacy podcast, would you tell me what does this word mean to you and how do you define it personally to you?
So when I thought about legacy before as a young man with ambitions, my legacy would be a lot about how much money I made or how many businesses I built or how many places I'd been able to see or who the important people that was able to meet. And those things are all amazing. And I certainly am not going to stop pursuing those things. But when I look back at what I've done so far, there's two things that come to mind immediately. One is the 5 to 10 babies that are walking around the planet right now because their parents met in a community or tribe that I started. In this case, typically the gym, and the weddings that I've been to, where the husband and wife met or otherwise met at our gym. And then the second thing is what I mentioned earlier: business babies. I love entrepreneurs. I've never talked to an entrepreneur and not had more energy at the end of the call. And so for me, the business babies that we can make, whether that's helping somebody get to the next level in their business success or putting two people together that I just know will hit it off and have great chemistry, and then seeing them go out and procreate with other business babies. So to me, my legacy, aside from this symbol that's tattooed on my forearm, which will be on my headstone, is the business babies and the literal human babies that are walking around as a result of my efforts.
Very cool, very cool. And I know as a part of your bio, you've helped transform thousands of people's lives and bodies and minds. And this is like your thing. And especially since you've retired in 2018, you sold the CrossFit gym. And now it's like you just help entrepreneurs, whether it's masterminds, with your podcast and so forth. So let me dive into the coaching bit, because one of the things I mentioned in the preamble was I love to interview coaches on this platform so that they can shine and people can truly understand the power of coaching, because
Mhm.
it's not just like Michael Jordan or Magic Johnson having a coach that pushes them on the court. It's also
Mhm.
our real lives. So if we were to dive into values, can you speak into how discovering your values helped you, what your values are, what your process is, kind of that whole thing that's maybe new to someone who might be listening somewhere on the other side of the world?
Of course. And so for sure, ever since I read a book called Traction, which is it's a book that talks a lot about core values. I've put a real deep dive into my own core values. But first, I want to take you back to when we started our first business, the day we filed our LLC. Like many entrepreneurs, somebody along the way told me we should have core values and a mission. And just like many entrepreneurs that I've met since, we wrote them down. We borrowed them from probably McDonald's or Apple or Intel, and we put them in a desk drawer, never to be seen or heard from again. And so if that sounds a lot like what you did to start your business, that's okay. I understand. I did it too. But this is what I mean when I talk about core values. Core values are not who you wish you were, they're not who people you admire are. Core values are the embers that burn deep inside of you that make you who you are today. However far you've gotten there because of your core values. And so, what I do is not try to help people to decide their core values. I help people to reveal their core values. And so as we go through that process, we try to outline not just who we are, but also like how do we work and how do we communicate with others and what motivates us to go through the world and do this work that we choose to do. And once you do that, Angelina, which I have done and would be happy to enumerate on, uh, I then had like this five-sided puzzle piece that I could hold up to the world, and I could tell with great accuracy how things would go in the future. And I can prove it because I could hold it up in the past and say, like, oh, this person or decision was this, but they weren't that. And that's why it always felt like we were butting heads and I couldn't figure it out. And so ever since that day, ever since that time, I've just had so much better of an ability to predict, hey, is this a person that I'll enjoy being friends with or working with? Is this an opportunity that I should consider taking? And it's just been a life changer for me.
Okay, so I'm going to put you on the spot a moment.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
your core values from my due
Yes.
diligence is the military mindset and the discipline, okay? And
Okay.
then there's the spirit of the puppy. So
Yes.
how did you discover for you, like, because I listened to your previous podcast, and the spirit of the puppy is like really important. Like when you
Yeah.
come in, like through your front door, like you want that energy of spirit of the puppy. Like yeah, like you're like living large, you're
Yeah.
curious, you're energetic. How did you discover that? Because that's like my intuitive sense is like that's distilled. Like that just wasn't like you woke up one day and you're like, I'm spirit of the puppy. Like
Yeah. Yeah. Well, two things. The process of it is you start just obliquely, you start with a big list of words and phrases that you just are. And so for me, I was born with spirit of the puppy. I didn't label it that at first, but I was born energetic. I'm high energy. I've got entrepreneur's disease, which some folks call ADD. I always enjoy meeting new people. I can spend time with people that I like all day and night and not need to recharge in a room somewhere. And it's just part of me. This is who I am. It's who I when, like you said, when we get on a podcast, typically I'm like this big huge energy because I really am the person that's excited to see you and learn more about you and have this exact conversation we're having now.
and
So I was
jump on the
born.
day.
Yeah, exactly. I was born with spirit of the puppy, but it wasn't until I joined the United States Army that I gained my second core value, which is military mindset. And so those words look a lot like discipline, responsibility, hard work, honor, loyalty, things like that. And those are two of my five core values. So those two core values make up what I call spear and clover, which the spear represents military mindset and the clover represents spirit of the puppy, which I can explain. There's a story behind that tattoo. Um, but the other three, I may as well run down for you. How I go about accomplishing my goals, I call it head up, feet moving, which means I'm always working hard towards my goals, but I'm paying attention to the changing environment as I'm going so I can
Reading the
maneuver on a
landscape,
dime. Yeah, exactly. Perfect.
reading the
Yeah, I'm
baseline.
reading the baseline. Yeah. Um, and then tribal is my next one. That's how I relate to others. I'm very much tribal. I look for opportunities to connect with people on a much deeper level than just, oh, we both like the Chicago Bears or whatever. It's much more when you see me around my what I would call my tribes, whether I'm leading them or just a part of them, you'll see the same shoes, you'll see the same outfits, you'll hear the same type of words. This very much came from my time in the military, my time in sports, and everybody knows CrossFit is like a borderline cult type of situation where everybody kind of acts and talks very similarly. And then my last core value is invested. That's what gets me out of bed in the morning. I'm invested in myself. I'm invested in my team. I'm invested in my clients and their results. And I'm invested in doing the absolute best I can in life to impact the world.
That's wonderful. And I just want to plug coaching here for a moment regarding what you said about invested. When people are committed, then their life changes. And if they don't have purpose, they're like a lost floating balloon. I hate to be
Yeah.
so blunt about it. One of the things I often say is what apathy is doing to your legacy is just not right. And you've just spoken to the
Interesting.
flip side, which is when people are committed and invested, that's a
Mhm.
whole other different, like you wake up passionate.
Oh yeah. It's
Yeah.
hard for me not to. It's hard for me not to wake up passionate, Angelina. I've found that, and maybe this is the ADD thing, this is the spirit of pup in me, but if I try to do things for other people's reasons or do things that I'm not super passionate about, it feels like painful and like a prison, and so for me, I've just my whole life, even looking back after I realized I should be an entrepreneur, when I was a kid, I loved snowboarding. I worked at the snowboarding hill and snowboarded all the time. I got paid to do it. When I was a kid, I liked clothes. I worked at the mall and I sold clothes and I got a great discount. I've always tried to shepherd my attention span, those things that I'm passionate about, into some way of being a career. And so now, when you talk about me retiring in 2018, I'm never going to retire in a traditional sense, but I don't have to do things that I don't want to do for money. I do the things that I love to do to get paid. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that is pure freedom right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wanna also say congratulations for getting there because that takes intentional effort, and you
Mhm,
had to shift from being an employee. Because even in the Army, you get a
mhm,
paycheck on the 1st and the 15th, generally speaking, and then you moved over to being self-employed or a business owner when you started the CrossFit gym, and you had partners, and I think you knew your partners, they were like your buddies, okay?
mhm.
Which is sometimes works well and sometimes it
Yeah.
doesn't work out so great, okay? But you crossed over, like, in what I call, like, that Robert Kiyosaki cash flow quadrant, and you
Yes.
made it as a business owner, but that's like, you know, it sometimes can be long hours. It sometimes not everyone makes it through. It's like how many restaurants succeed and so forth. Yeah. So I just wanted to highlight that for a moment that you're definitely in the place of freedom. And I just also want to say that it's lucky because some people don't get there through the hard work, the discipline, the focus. They have like a great idea, like I want to find the $80,000 Easter egg, and then they can't bear it when the obstacles come and squeeze
Mhm.
them in that refinement process.
Well, it's interesting because I agree with you that many entrepreneurs work their hearts out and then still struggle and inevitably sometimes fail. But the motto at my business is winning is simple, period. And it is. It's not easy, but it is simple. A lot of times as entrepreneurs, we get from point zero to point one because we're willing to break down walls and wear all the hats and do all of the hard work. But unfortunately, for so many entrepreneurs that are struggling to get to the next level where they can have a little bit of freedom, because that's not freedom, that's self employment, right? To get to the next level where you have freedom, you have to put down the sledgehammer, you have to take off all of the different hats, and you have to slow yourself down and do something different than what you got to the party with. And that's a really hard concept for people to do. And so when I talk to people all the time, what they describe to me is an impossible situation. It feels impossible. I keep struggling and straining and fighting, and I'm not breaking through. Stop struggling, straining, and fighting, and try something that you haven't done, which is to slow down, take the magic between your ears, and scale it out to a team.
Yeah, I think what you're referring to is working on the business, not just in the business.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I think it's hard for people to understand what that means. And so I had a phone call with somebody yesterday where he's in a really tough spot, and the thing that you want to do is just say, "Hey, the thing you're I trust you. I believe you're giving it your best effort, and you're a capable and intelligent person, which means if you're trying as hard as you can and you're an intelligent and capable person and it seems impossible, you're trying the wrong thing. And so by definition, we need to change that."
Yeah, I'm only smiling because I'm thinking about the spirit of the puppy metaphor, and you're almost
Yeah.
like, drop the bone and look over there. Drop the bone and right? And they just,
Of
no, I'm
course.
not gonna let it go.
Yeah. Yes, you're exactly right.
Okay, so one of the things that we talked about again in the preamble before recording was you had said to me that you weren't necessarily supposed to succeed. So I'm going to go to the deep place for a moment.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, um, you faced epilepsy. Is that how I should say it, or what are what's the proper language?
So, I should say that for me personally, this is not a sensitive topic. It's honestly an afterthought for me, but I did suffer from, what is the word for it? Adolescent or, yeah, I think it's adolescent, epilepsy, right? And so I would have grand mal seizures in the middle of the night, and even to this day, I would hear a tone right before it would happen, and then I would just wake up in the hospital, and so to me, it was never, sleeping on a bunk bed. I would fall off of a bunk bed, not wake up, and end up in a hospital, right? And it was probably traumatizing to my body, but not to me personally.
So if
But
you were
my
on a bunk bed,
parents,
did your sibling down below? Did he was
no, I
like
didn't.
Jason just fell?
I just had a bunk bed. I didn't have a. I mean, I have two sisters, but they weren't sleeping in the bunk bed. I was alone with a bunk bed.
Okay, so in the
But
middle of the
yeah,
night it was like thump, and then your parents woke up.
yep. Or I would.
Okay.
So what would happen is I would hear a tone, and I would know it was coming, and then I would just like like quickly lose control. So I'd like bang on the wall or something like as an
Oh,
alarm to them. Yeah,
okay.
and yeah, my mom, to talk about it, I think would probably have a lot more difficulty than me because it had to be just horrifying for them. But for me, you know, I I'm not someone who, this is interesting because I don't know if what I'm going to say is accurate or not because I haven't thought about it enough, but I deal with trauma well. I don't hold on to trauma in those ways. And I don't know if that's a natural thing or not. But it's hard for me to answer you that accurately this quickly because I haven't thought about that much.
Yeah. Well, I just one of the things I had shared with you is that I knew a fashion photographer. and it
Mhm.
was something that he was like, "We're not going to talk about it. Don't bring it up." And I thought, wow, I bet there's so many people out in the world that if they
Yeah.
have had that experience, it's like they don't know how to give the language to it,
Mhm.
and they might feel alone, isolated, and if you can let go of that, that's great because it's not like, like luggage you're carrying, like
Yeah.
Santa Claus, like
Yeah. I'm a little surprised that somebody would use flashing lights so frequently, professionally, that had a history of, epilepsy though, because that's one of the triggers is
Oh,
flashing lights.
yeah. Again, see, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So do you know what brought it on? Was it like you ate peanut butter and jelly and the peanut butter had like an allergic reaction or
No, I don't know. I had thought that it was an allergic reaction to a medicine that kicked it off, but I think I'm mistaken about that. The last I heard from my mother, because I think the last time I had a seizure, I was 11 or 12. And I probably had big ones. I probably had 10 or 12 and maybe 30 that were minor altogether. But yeah, no, it was never a source of, it wasn't something that was a part of my identity in a way where it would have been like intimate or shameful or anything like that. Um, but at the same time, I was going to a private school for for learning disabilities that I had been put in because I was kicked out of school in first grade. I'll believe it or not. I was a little too rambunctious. I think I had that ADD that everybody got in the '90s, and so yeah. So I spent my time there, and I don't think epilepsy was really a big concern for me, but I bet you my mother and father would have different things to say about that.
yeah, different experience. Yeah. So it's interesting because I almost wonder if getting pulled from first grade made you think outside of the box, which then allowed you to say, hey, if everyone's going to get a job and I got offered this finance job, I'm going to step outside of the
Yeah.
square and hey, I'm going to start a CrossFit gym and do jujitsu. And oh, wow, it worked out fantastic. And now I'm retired. Like, so it's because it's almost like I don't know if you were like 6 or 7 years old in first grade, but it's almost like, oh, congratulations, here's change. And you're like, oh,
Mhm.
okay, I got to change.
Yeah, you're dead on actually. So what happened was, I was a very difficult student, I'm sure. As someone who I'm not a teacher, but I do teach things to people. I can only imagine what I must have been like as a kid because I was crazy inquisitive and curious and would just raise my hand and ask questions. And the answers probably were often not enough, right? And so the fortunate thing was I was 8 years old and I was in a 40 person school that was K through 12. And so there were four classrooms with 10 kids each, kind of separated by age. But I was by far the youngest kid in that class. Um, and so fortunately for me, they had these really caring teachers who took an interest in me and allowed me to work at my own pace. And so the carrot and the stick was this. If I could finish my work quickly, they would allow me to read on, they had the little pillow with the arms on it on the floor in the corner.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I
yeah.
would read, I was like 8 years old reading like Stephen King books. I read like 30 Stephen King books and I was just reading constantly. And I would go through multiple school books a year, and I was way ahead because they let me train at my own pace. And again, I don't think that it was necessarily that I was super duper intelligent. It was more that if you put something that's interesting to me in front of me, or you give me the opportunity to earn the ability to do what I want, I'll do anything, Angelina. I've said before, you couldn't pay me $1 million to work 40 hours at your company, but you can't stop me from working 100 hours on something I'm super passionate about.
Yeah. I almost wonder if it was that your imagination was allowed to run wild. So here you're
Mhm.
reading Stephen King books and it's
Yeah.
just, there's no holds barred. It's almost like a Montessori school,
It's very much like that. But there's also gang members and suicidal people in the school at the same time.
which is real life.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. So even when you're at like jujitsu and the CrossFit gym, it's like, yeah, it's real life. I mean, and what I mean by real life is a lot of times when you go to corporate America, we're all like civilized with our
yeah,
tie and all the this and the
yeah,
that and the holiday party. And
yeah.
and when you get to a CrossFit gym, it's almost like survival. You're out there with like I don't want to say like the wild animals of the concrete jungle, but it's like people aren't going to put on their P's and Q's.
Well, it's funny you say that because what I think there's this connective tissue that I've found in the things that I really love, and I call it capital T truth. And so, podcasting as an art form is capital T truth. We're just having a conversation. I will tell you, by the way, this is the nicest I've ever looked for any podcast ever. I put on a sweater and I took off my hat. This is the first time, and it was because you so politely reached out and asked me if I would dress nicely because we're discussing my legacy. And I'll be honest with you, I respect that so much. But jujitsu, CrossFit, all of these things that I'm interested in, stand-up comedy, is it funny or not? I'll laugh if it's funny. Did you choke me or not? I'll tap if you did. Did I get that weight over the bar or not? You'll know because it'll be over my head, right? And so there's this thing of like, I don't deal in, I don't enjoy things that are the way that they are because we say so. I enjoy things that are the way they are because they're true. Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, I think what you're referring to is like the social nuances, and you don't wanna just play the
Yeah,
game. Give me the real stuff. Don't
yeah,
BS me with
absolutely.
the mask and the act.
Well, and to that point, what I've found is if you're authentic and we disagree, I love you. But if you agree with everything I say and I don't believe that you actually have done the work to actually find that result, I have no interest. And so it's not that I want people to be like me, it's that I want you to earnestly go through life authentically. And I think, that those are the type of people I get along with so well. Some of my favorite people disagree with me on almost everything, Angelina.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. That's authenticity. It's raw and it's real and it's
Yeah,
lovely and wonderful. Yes. I want to say one other thing about the military before I move on to my next question. And
sure.
that is, I almost wonder if the military taught you that, like, when it's time, because you said you deal well with trauma, that it's almost like when it's time to leave that valley, you just come out of the shell shock.
Yeah, it's interesting. I my story of being in the military, I was deployed twice. I did work very hard for one of those deployments. It was incredibly challenging and difficult. Um, I do not suffer from anything that I would quantify as PTSD, but respectfully, I was not in situations often that maybe would lead to that. And I just took an approach of it just seems to me that anxiety is pointless and that anxiety is fear of something that is yet to happen. I'm afraid I'm going to get shot at. I'm afraid I'm going to get fired. I'm afraid I'm going to run out of money, whatever it is. And that just honestly has always seemed like a waste of energy. I don't think that it would make me more prepared for battle to expect I was going to be attacked. I don't think it makes me more prepared for business to fear failure. I don't think it would make me more prepared for a date to assume that the person would be not who I hope that they are. And so in those genres and those things, I've been successful because I just treat the person in front of me just like this conversation. I didn't expect you to be a certain way. And so because of that, it's such a beautiful thing as it's unfolding and we're learning more about each other, right?
Yeah, good. You're not a doubting Thomas, as they would say.
No, I'm not.
Yeah, but I'm bump. Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And to that point, I would rather be wrong and learn a lesson about you than
Okay.
assume I than
And
be
be tainted.
deliberately. Yeah, exactly. Like
Yeah.
why and I talked to my wife about the dating thing comes to mind because when we met on Tinder. Um, she had been a little jaded from dating and I had not been dating on Tinder very long, but I just came to each time I met a person as a fresh person because in my experience that's the truth.
Yeah, that's lovely because that's the fresh slate.
Mhm.
Yeah, it almost, and I'm gonna move on to the next question after this. It almost reminds me of that Native American metaphor about the 2 wolves on the shoulders, and you're just choosing to feed the wolf of fresh starts and taking people as they are, and again, I don't think you're bringing, like, that Santa Claus baggage with you,
Try
which is
not to. Yeah.
again, you're bringing spirit of the puppy.
Gosh darn right. Yeah.
Okay, so here's the next question. What else helps you develop an intentional legacy today?
Well, I have taken very deliberate steps. You talked about me engineering my lifestyle, and that's true. But that started with really visualizing in a very intense and deep way the mountain that I wanted to climb, exactly the life that I wanted to live. And then once I had that picture, every time I took a step, I just asked myself, does this take me a step closer to the top of the mountain, or does this take me a step further from it? But once I got to where I'm at, which is certainly not the top of the mountain, but it's a very good place. Well, now I get to actually just show up and be who I am. And so, because of that, my legacy is just me able to talk. I mean, I've said this to other people about themselves, but I'll say it about me. I've spent the last 15 years as an entrepreneur and 20 years as an adult. becoming an answering machine for my own beliefs on the world. And so because I've done that, there's nothing you could ask me today that I would be uncomfortable about or ashamed of, because I think through the way I feel about the world, and I talk about it on podcasts, and I coach it in masterminds and in programs, and I think deeply about these things, and I spend time every week on what I call solo missions, thinking about those types of things. And so at the end of the day, my legacy, aside from this symbol, which I do love, and like I said, will go on my tombstone. But aside from that, my legacy is just me opening my mouth and answering the questions that, somebody like you asks me, or me putting things out there. I view that as, it's my version of writing books. I may one day write a book, but I'll tell you what, Angelina, I could talk a lot more than I can write. So you'll probably look more at podcasts.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, yeah. I wanted you to speak into it because it is an active decision. It's not like
Mm-hmm.
somebody just wakes up, the final year of their life and they're like, "Oh, I'll design a legacy." It's kind of like, what do you do in your living years? And a part of it is like that reflection of like, yes, I am taking personal agency. Yes, I am taking ownership. And it's a very active decision. It's like it's creative and it's vulnerable and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's not like you can wait for a boss to tell you, "You have permission now, Jason." Like
Yeah. Yeah, I think about two things when I think about that. One is, um, I think of my life like a book, and I don't want to write a book where I'm not the main character, and I don't want to write a book where the linear narrative doesn't make sense, and I don't want to write a book where the most interesting thing happens in the first few chapters and then nothing happens after that. Those things sound very not interesting to me. And then secondly, I'll never forget getting back from the military and moving to Chicago, and I was so clean then, Angelina. And so I was walking through the city of Chicago where this is unheard of, and I'm like seeking out eye contact with everybody on the street. And in hindsight, even in the moment, I remember thinking about it. I had nothing to be ashamed of and nothing to hide. I had only lived virtuously pretty much for 4 years. I was proud of everything I had done, the relationships I'd built, the missions we had accomplished. And my whole life now, since then, has been all about paying attention to whether or not I was actively seeking eye contact. And currently, I have no problem looking anybody in the eye. And I want to maintain that.
That's so good. You wanna know why that's so good?
Why?
Because we live in a society where sometimes people don't look at each other. They don't look at the
Yeah.
cashier in the grocery store,
Yeah.
and then it's like people feel invisible, especially with adults. It's like they can just fall through the cracks.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's not let that happen. I think conversation, I mean, even now, like my camera's up there, but your eyes are right there. And I'm looking into your eye. You know what I mean?
It's personal. Yeah,
it's
yeah,
hard to
yeah.
break. Yeah. It's hard to
Yeah.
break. Yeah.
Yeah. So very cool then. So you come back to Chicago and you got this fresh slate. And I love the fact that you make an intention every day to notice things like you're paying attention and you're observing like patterns and what's important now and how have you changed. And you've talked before about your non-negotiables. So let me ask you the next question. And
Sure.
it's when it comes to execution or actualization, what slows you down and or keeps your dreams and projects small? Or maybe you'll come back to me and surprise me and say, "Oh no, I've got big dreams." What say you?
That's a great question. And so it's something that I help people with very early in the course that I run entrepreneurs through with, is that as entrepreneurs, we're visionaries. We can see the world as it should be and can't help but take action. That's what I always say. And it's true. I see a vacant lot and I can see the business. I understand the marketing, the branding. There's the parking lot. Oh, and I know this person could run it. All that happens. But what I've seen is in my younger entrepreneurial days, I've seen too many of those ideas die on the vine because I couldn't break that down into achievable steps. And so now I take big, hairy goals and I have to, and it's the financial analyst in me, but I need to know that the scaffolding exists between here and the top of that mountain. Right. I need to know that there's actual, if somebody comes to me and they say, my goal is to make $1 million this year, red flag. Like, why is it $1 million? Why is that round number the thing? Like, tell me about the actions that you're going to take and the projects that you're going to build that will ultimately earn you $1 million. And so I love, love, love when I give you an example. Even as recently as setting up this business, I was setting my goal for next year. And I was like, I know that I could sell 10 new clients per month. So my goal is 120 clients. And then I was like, but wait, I sold 0 last month. And so what if I go out and I sell 4 in the first month? That's the best month I've ever had, and I just failed. I got 40% of my goal, and so my goal is actually 52. It's actually almost half of what my original goal was, because I know the actions that I can take that can result with me making 1 sale a week. And I know that that will be enough. Oh, and by the way, when I'm 6 months in and we pass that goal, I'm going to feel like a freaking rock star. And I'd much rather feel that way than feel like a loser who just had the best year of their business's life.
Yeah, yeah. So would you say what slows you down is lack of clarity when you're not sure of the scaffolding?
No, a lot of times what slows me down now, I've gotten very good at like running the model in my head of like, I want to do this. Well, this is going to take this, this, and this. And
The
that's going to take
forecasting.
these people. Yeah, I'm a forecast. I used to love modeling. I still do. But and I was trained on it, right? But now what slows me down typically is I'm unwilling to hire or build a team on people that aren't core value fits and that I can't really trust. And so I
Okay.
build relationships within my organization. Right now I have one employee, his name's Mo, and in 2 years or 1 year, he's going to be a second brain walking around outside of my body. But for now, I have to slow down so that he can be built up into what we need him to be to take over and to do well.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the people that surround us make a huge influence on our output
Mm-hmm.
and results and mindset and all of that. So,
Yeah.
what do you think you're doing differently than prior generations? Or did your parents say, Jason, we're going to talk about legacy at the kitchen table or the dining room table, or how, talk to me about this?
Yeah, that's a good question. So my parents were not entrepreneurs, but they're wonderful. We didn't talk about, I just don't think they had the language for it. They were very young, and I think they did a terrific job. But as I had a child at 38, and that's just way easier than having a child at, 17 or 18. And so for me, uh, I just have nothing to hide from you. And so I don't have secrets, and I don't whisper at the dinner table, and I don't not talk about money, and none of that stuff. That's not a problem for me. I'm not ashamed of what I have or have not accomplished, or what I do or don't have. In fact, what I've found is my way to work through problems is when I'm uncomfortable about something. Usually my toes curl like they are right now, uh, and when that happens, I talk about it. Oh my God, you'll never believe it. I sneezed and it got all over today, or what, like the thing that actually goes bad. I typically, that's how I work it out, is I put it out there, because now there's no demon, right? And now I've
Yeah.
slayed that dragon before it ever had a chance to grow.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if your parents ever look at, they're like, wow, Jason walked away from having to work a 9 to 5 at age, oh, I don't know how old you were in
Whatever. Yeah.
2018.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like if,
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to say. I guess you would have to ask them. But I think, I think that I am a direct result of the hard work my dad put in, and the encouragement and support and dimension that my mother made sure that I had.
okay, okay. That's lovely. I just
Yeah.
wanted to bring it up because if you had
Yeah.
turned to your parents and say, "Yeah, I'm taking personal agency of my legacy," they could have been like, "Well, we lived through the Great Depression, and like you said, they were younger, so they
Yeah.
may have never thought like they could have, engineered their life or designed a legacy."
Yeah, I think that in the case of my mom, I think she had me young, and so she was in a situation where I wouldn't say she couldn't, because I could introduce you to Mary Tautimes, who's a terrific human being and built a huge business with as a single mom. But she chose to build my legacy from when I was born, and my dad chose to be a union plumber so that he could support me living in a wonderful place, and he worked very, very, very hard to do that. And so I think, frankly, you could make the case that my parents were such legacy builders that they skipped a generation.
Hmm. That's lovely. I
Thank
can
you.
I can just feel the heart space and the values that they instilled in you. And I don't mean to put you on the spot at all if your toes are
No.
curling.
No, no, no. That's a good thing. I don't want to be in any conversations where my toes don't curl at least once or twice.
Okay. And I
Yeah.
know that talking about one's legacy is very personal, it's intimate. It's like, and even the thing about like, if you dress nice, it's kind of like when people um honor a holiday, whether it's like Christmas mass or it's like going
Hmm.
to temple or whatever. It's like, well, this is like your legacy. It's not just like, you live and then you like, my dad made a joke one time. He was with me in Malibu and we were at the Getty Villa, which is
Hmm.
kind of like it has like all these
Beautiful.
Greek statues. And he turned to me and he made this joke and he was like, "Yeah, most people work their entire lives and then they just die." And then he turned and walked off. But there was a little bit of truth in that. And I
Oh
so
yeah.
yeah. So I think this idea of a legacy, it's like, well, really, can I design one? I didn't know I could. And so they never get around to like thinking that they could look at the bigger picture, break it down into like little milestones, or you called it the scaffolding, and like actualize it each year. Even if it's like they just spend 20 minutes each weekend or 20 minutes a day or something where it's like they put a little dirt on the plot or however the expression goes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I wonder, you're making me think about legacy more than I typically do. And I think it would be nice to be remembered or to leave an impact, or if one day this was like a Nike swoosh or something. But I'll be honest with you, as I'm thinking about it in the moment, my legacy that's important to me is how I feel about like, am I being understood and heard in a way that I wish to be? And then are the people that I care about in my personal life, are they hearing and understanding me? Like, do my children on my deathbed, do they want to be there? Does my wife, are we still married and happily? Like, those are the things that I think, for me, my legacy could end after those people were gone, kind of a Coco situation, if you have
Yeah,
does
yeah,
you
yeah, yeah, yeah.
uh
That's a
and I
wonderful
don't think,
movie.
yeah, and I don't think that would bother me a whole lot. I have a desire and a strong push to help the people that I can help, and I think I can help a lot of people. But I don't necessarily need for them to remember me if I'm gone as much. I don't know why that is. And
Yeah.
maybe I'm not there yet. I don't know.
Well, I think there's something to be said about living a well-intentioned life where your
Mm,
hands are on the steering wheel compared to being in reaction mode.
mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I try not to be in that situation as much. I talk about this a little bit where I don't get angry anymore, almost ever, unless one of two things happens. One is a compression of time. If something is important and there's no time, then I can get frustrated quickly. This happens occasionally, and I could give you examples, but who cares? And then the second one is unless there's an irrational, immovable situation, which I would call a toddler. So my wife and I just like stopped having personal issues, right? Because we figure it out. We talk about things, and when they come up, hey, you said this thing, and it kind of made me feel this way, and we've become very, very good at communicating in our relationship, and so we've just so much mutual respect. At least I would say that. I hope she would agree. And then Lucy comes along. And she's completely inconsolable, and she can't be reasoned with, and she's the most important thing to both of us, and sometimes we disagree on what should be done, and it's like that's a whole new world for us that is a struggle. And so it's had to shift from solving the problem to sort of solving how we feel about this unsolvable problem.
Yeah, and one of the things we had talked about before recording was this idea of like how much school prepared us for real life. And there
Hmm.
was like no white paper, no memo, no no like
Yeah.
mastermind.com class.
Yeah, yeah, and people tell you it's the hardest thing you'll ever do, and you just never know what that means, because it's not the hardest thing physically that I've ever done, and it's not the hardest thing like logically that I've ever done, but it's the hardest thing insanely that I've ever done, where like things don't make sense, and what worked yesterday doesn't work today, and all that stuff.
Yeah, and toddlers will also test.
What's that?
Toddlers will also
Oh yeah.
test you and
Oh yeah.
test you.
Yeah. We're not even at that full stage yet. We're at 18 months. So we're just getting into that. Yeah, we're in for it, I'm sure. Yeah.
Very cool. Okay. So, how do you frame your dreams separate from money or status? And the reason I ask this question is because sometimes when it comes to legacy planning, people just think about like the will, the health directive, the financial power of attorney, and then they forget those little things called dreams that are so meaningful to one's heart.
I regularly, about once a month, although it's been a little more than a month right now, I'm going next week, we'll go into a float tank. And I will think about these things for an hour, for 90 minutes, actually. Um, and when I come out, sometimes I'll continue on a walk right behind the place that I go. But either way, when I dream things now, usually my dreams aren't I want to win the World Series anymore, right? They're things that I actually could potentially do. And honestly, I just feel like I can do them. That's how I feel, honestly, Angelina, because I've learned through working with other people and through building businesses of varying success. I've learned that if I'm not the type of person who will dream something that I can't do anymore, and I think I can do a lot. And then I also am the type of person who knows this, how to build the scaffolding that will eventually reach that goal. And so when I do get to that point, it really is like, okay, is this something that I really do want to energize and do? And is this something that I have space in my life for to pursue? And if the answer to those two questions are yes, then I just go do it. I mean, I could tell you about a company that unfortunately, due to COVID, we were supposed to open in like February or March of 2020. I went into a float with nothing, and I came out with not just the name, not just the business, like the logo, who was going to work there, the address physically of where it was going to be, and that actually did get built. And it wasn't magic, and it wasn't, I'm not even bragging. It was just like, well, those are that's the thing that we want to do. And I think it'll probably take this, this, and this. And I think we can do this, this, and this. So we did. And then COVID-19 hit. So, it is a failure there, but I don't think of that as shameful or a real failure where I would be not proud to talk about it right now. I think of that as the operating environment. And,
The baseline.
from, yeah. And not only that, this just came out yesterday. I was talking to somebody, they were like, well, what do you do when COVID comes and everything's awful? And I'm like, that's the best possible time for me to be as an entrepreneur, because I don't rely on luck. So when the economy is good and people are throwing money at everybody, well, you could confuse me for my competitor who's maybe not as good. But when things are tough, it's just like when a bear comes to camp, you only have to outrun the slowest person. And so to me, it's like when operating environment is rough, I'm happy. I'm like, great. I love a downturn, because I will be the one that is going to go out and over deliver, and is going to energize this thing in a way that I think is virtuous and honorable. So yeah, so luck is my enemy.
Yeah. I appreciate that you talked about the flow tank. And I hope that you had
Yeah.
paper in there with you.
No paper. In fact,
Wow.
it's funny. So I'll go into a float tank. I do a lot of different things in a float tank. Nothing too weird. But I'll do like Wim Hof breathing in the beginning. I'll do like some breath work in the beginning, and sometimes I'll just kick around and like bounce like a pong ball in the float. But a lot of times I'll come up with a good idea, and then I have to kind of like run it through my head throughout the course of 90 minutes. Because if you have a good idea at the beginning, by the time you get done, it's like a chapter of a book. And so I do sort of make sure I'm very deliberate about remembering those things. And more times than once, I've gotten out early because I was like, this is it. It's cooked. We got to go. Like, I got to get out of here and write it down or whatever. And by the way, if you're listening to this and you've never done a float tank, it's a sensory deprivation tank. There is lighting typically in them. The new ones are not as scary. The new ones are like giant hot tubs that are sealed, right? And you
I've
can
been in
go in
one.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're fantastic. But I recommend, if you're listening to this as entrepreneurs, especially if you identify with like ADHD, do 3. Because the first time you go in there, you're gonna put too much weight on it, too much gravity, and it's not gonna work out for you, or maybe your mind's racing. The second time, maybe you'll have a good experience, but by the third time, you'll know if this is a place where you can calm your mind and just be. And if you can, it's incredibly valuable.
Yeah. I think it's an opportunity to be alone with one's thoughts.
Mhm.
Like Emerson and Thoreau, they had Walden Woods. Emerson would go on. Yeah, 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 yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
I
yeah.
love that. Yeah.
Right.
I
And,
moved to the
and
woods to live deep and suck the marrow out of life.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and also to be able to handle being alone with your thoughts. And so, especially with like Gen Z and millennials, that may be kind of a new concept to like, what do you mean I got to be away from my cell phone and the blue screens for 90 minutes or whatever it is? Yeah,
Yeah.
I tried one in Toronto, and it was a wonderful experience. And I can
Mhm.
see why it's like you take away all those distractions. And yeah. Well, anyways, let me
Yeah.
go ahead, please.
No, please go ahead.
Well, I just I know we're kind of coming up on the hour, so I just wanted to, in respect to your time, ask you. So, what are the top 3 emotions that you get to feel when you get to lean into the design of your legacy?
Agency. I get to do what I want to do, and sometimes that's good, and sometimes it's not. Um, I get to feel the gratification of knowing that I've helped somebody through something that maybe seemed too difficult to get through. Um, and the word I would say is brotherhood, but I don't mean male. I
Com-
fellowship. I like
Camaraderie.
camaraderie. Yeah, sure. I feel that. I'm very much a believer in the connections I mean, especially moving from Chicago to a more rural place. I live in the Indiana Dunes now. Um, Going from having a tribe of 350 like-minded CrossFit people to going to me and my wife living on the dune, was interesting. And so this type of stuff, like when I tell on other podcasters or other business people, like, hey, hit me up anytime, I actually mean it. Like I actually enjoy. I've never gotten on a call with an entrepreneur. I told you this already. I'll say it again. I've never gotten on a call with an entrepreneur and regretted it or not gotten more energy. The only times that has happened, and it did one happen this week, but the only times that happened is when the person on the other end is either being inauthentic or is just attacking me for whatever. I mean, that has literally only ever happened maybe once or
You're
twice,
like,
but
please don't scapegoat on me.
well, or just, and I don't mind that either. I've gotten to this place where like when somebody puts up walls, even that doesn't offend me because I just understand with enough experience now that like that's what you feel like you have to do. And I can be patient for that too, if I believe that you are in earnest trying to solve and grow, right? If you're trying to grow and you're just not ready to untighten your arms or whatever that would be, and relax and open yourself up to growth, well, I can be there for that. But when you're trying to propagate a lie or you're trying to lie to yourself and have me co-sign on it, that
Yeah.
I won't do.
Yeah. You don't want to enable. Okay. So what I'm hearing is the feeling of maybe fulfillment.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I feel
Yeah.
I feel very fulfilled. I don't have like a longing for anything other than just more. I would love more of this.
Yeah. Very nice. And who, if you had any positive role models today, who would they be, whether historic or living?
Oh, okay. I really like Tim Kennedy. I would move to get my kid into Tim Kennedy's school. I love Tim Kennedy. I went to his sheepdog response course for my bachelor party, and I'm pleased to report not just him but everybody that was in that group was exactly who you hope is the guardian at the gates for our country. Um, I like Rogan. I like Joe Rogan a lot. I like um, Jocko Willink is great. And by the way, I'm not like these people in a lot of ways, but I like, and I could give you a longer list, but I like a lot of people that live authentically. I don't think I would enjoy her company, but I think Ayn Rand is awesome. But I don't think we would have a nice conversation. She doesn't have spirit of the puppy.
Yeah. 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 She's a truth teller, though.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
She is a
Even
truth
if it's
teller.
just her truth.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. And she would, but you know what was interesting about her? Because again, I understand the people that would throw stones, uh, but there is no question that she proudly said what she thought. And you could say the same thing about who's a good example, Noam Chomsky or something. Like somebody on the other side where you're like, yeah, I can get behind that too. Like, not that I have to agree with the idea, but I love when people are authentic and willing to get up and here's my 1,600-page book on it. Like, wow, that's amazing.
They
Yeah.
really believe in what they
Yeah. 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 Like a great example of somebody that I don't often or always agree with, Jon Stewart. You see that guy, Jon Stewart, who's right next to a bunch of other people who are not being intellectually honest with their own consistency. And that guy will stand up and say, like, actually, I think we're wrong about this one. Or like, and to me, that I cannot more speak highly about somebody than when they are. If I talk to somebody for an hour and I don't hear about where they've been wrong about things, we're in trouble, you know?
Yeah. I think what you're pointing to is how refreshing truth is these days.
Mm-hmm. I
Yeah.
agree.
Like don't load me up with more BS, please. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. Very nice. Anything else? Like the name of your podcast or how somebody could reach you?
Yeah, so my podcast is the Spear and Clover podcast. You can find us at spearandclover.com. But before you do any of that, go to Angelina's website and like her podcast, subscribe to it, and share it with somebody else because she is doing such an amazing job bringing on folks like me and other people to share their stories about their legacy. So if you still have energy after that and you're interested in the topics that we talked about today, or you want help getting to the next level in your business, I can certainly help you too. The company is www.spearandclover.com, and I would love to hear from you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jason.
Of course,
Yeah,
thank
in
you for having
closing, I
me.
just wanted to acknowledge your authenticity and also your ability to create that scaffolding, because I think that is an amazing coaching tool, that if somebody has the idea of, I want to create a legacy, and maybe they vibe with you, they could reach out and you could help them quantitatively in that logical strategy, say, here's where you're at now, let's work on your life, on your business, come join my mastermind and the other tools I've leaned into in my lifetime, and get you to where you want to go. You don't have to just be swimming out there alone, just spinning your wheels 60 or 80 hours a week, thinking that that's the only way in today's economy to get ahead or feel happiness or satisfaction.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, absolutely.
So thank you so much for your time, and thank you for bringing Spirit of the Puppy and all of your wonderful thoughts into this space. And I'm
Of
just going to
course.
close out with also just the idea of, you talked about, I just wanted to circle back with this before, the aspect of real life. And I think that's what people are craving these days. So
Mhm.
whether it was your experiences early on with, maybe members of the fringe of society, it's like, I think you can um, embrace that. And I think that's what people need these days. They don't need more heirs. They just want the capital T truths.
Yeah, I agree with you. And well, we could talk all day, so I'll just let it go there. But yes, I agree with you. Dot, dot, dot.
Okay, very cool. Okay, so like Jason said, if you are tuning in on YouTube, please remember to like and subscribe. Or if you're watching on Apple Podcasts, please remember to rate and review. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you, Jason, for speaking into your legacy.
Thank you.